Hi everybody, we're here with Bushwhacker talking about how to plan food for a backcountry trip and using store-bought items and dehydrated items that you dehydrate yourself and freeze-dried items that you can buy online. So when you're planning for a trip, you begin by taking the number of days and number of meals. So sometimes your first day and your last day only have 1 or 2 meals on them. The number of people who are coming along and their preferences. So we usually plan our trips based on the person who has the most needs or preferences. So for instance, if someone cannot have fish, we don't take fish of any type on the trip. We just plan our meals around other proteins or vegetarian dinners. So we simplify it by keeping everybody's meal preferences in mind. And it's not just food preferences, it's also how much do people want to eat. And that does take a little bit of planning in advance because you want to carry exactly the right amount of food with you when you go on a trip and not pack out cooked wet food. It cannot be burned or buried, and so you want to get it correct and supplement with other items if the meals aren't quite enough. So keeping in mind that most people when they're on a backcountry trip will be exercising all day. So either hiking all day or paddling all day, your meal needs will be a little bit more than an average day at home. So we do tend to take a hot meal for the evening, a cold meal for lunchtime that can be eaten either shoreside or in the canoes if we're out paddling, or can be easily pulled out of your pack while you're hiking. And then breakfast can either be a hot breakfast or a cold breakfast. Sometimes lunch will include a hot item that we can prepare at breakfast time and take with us. So thinking about the hot meals and then adding in substantial snacks. Now, we do add an extra day of meals to our packing, just in case something should go awry, if a meal gets tipped out while it's being cooked, or if the weather is inclement and you just can't set up your stove and cook. We always make sure that we have grab-and-go items. So either some nuts or some bread with some spreads, or something that can be made just with boiling water and instant soup in a thermos, just in case you don't have the opportunity or the time to prepare the meal that you had planned in advance. So looking at dehydrating versus store-bought items. So when you're starting out, before you purchase a dehydrator, you would plan your meals around the things that you can buy in the store that are already dehydrated and packaged, or that you can order specialty online or find at a specialty store. So generally when you have a dehydrator, you would be dehydrating your own vegetables because it's inexpensive and it's a very, very simple item to dehydrate. But you can buy freeze-dried items to supplement your dried vegetables. So corn and peas in particular are very difficult to rehydrate once you've dehydrated them yourself. So I tend to buy freeze-dried corn and pea blends just so that they rehydrate very quickly and at the same rate as the other items in the pot. Fruit is another thing that you can buy freeze-dried, or you can be dehydrating it yourself. Potato-based meals, dried cheese, pancake mixes, and instant rice. Aside from the pancake mix, the instant rice and the cheese you can dehydrate on your own, but really if you're pushed for time or you don't have your own machine, these are items that work very well in a meal plan for camping. You can buy pre-packaged room temperature bacon to use for, we use it in potato dishes for breakfast, we put it in soups for lunchtime, or you can add it into noodle or rice dishes at night. But all of the meals that we make can also be made vegetarian. And if you dehydrate or package the meat separately, if you have a group that has some vegetarians and some who prefer meat, you can rehydrate the meat separately and add it in, and then you can just cook one meal for everybody. Items like this that we usually keep in our fridge, if you read the packaging, they are shelf stable at room temperature, and you wouldn't want to take them on a really long trip or a trip where you're going to have super high temperatures, but they're nice to have along, especially for the first couple of days, so you don't have to carry them a long distance. When you're dehydrating your own meals, you have a lot more flexibility. This is a pasta sauce with chicken, spinach, mushrooms, tomatoes. And this jar was completely full when it was wet. And when you dehydrate it, it goes down to about half the size, but more importantly, it goes down to a fraction of the weight because the water is gone from the food. This can also be packaged in a vacuum sealed bag, which will make it smaller yet again. This is the same pasta sauce dehydrated onto the cooked noodles. So if you're someone who likes to just dump one item into your pot, this is one way that you can dehydrate the exact same dish. This is plain cooked pasta with a little bit of salt that has been dehydrated. And the bonus to this is that it can be rehydrated without actual cooking because it has been cooked once. So you can do rehydrating in stainless steel containers, sometimes in freezer bag cooking, but also if you're cooking at the campsite, it takes much less fuel to rehydrate an already cooked noodle than to cook a noodle that is essentially raw that you've purchased in the grocery store. Same thing with rice. You can cook your own rice with water or vegetable stock or chicken stock and dehydrate it yourself. There are things to look up regarding rice to make sure you're dehydrating at the correct temperature. But you can get brown and white versions of already dehydrated rice, and these rehydrate very well in a stainless steel container. Some things like muffin mixes and pancake mixes already have egg components in them. You can buy freeze-dried eggs that we use on our trips. The brand that we like is Ova Easy, but also Mountain House and other dehydrated and freeze-dried food companies do offer their own egg substitutes. But often these mixes can be added with just water or water and a bit of ghee. When you're dehydrating foods, it's very important to keep the fat separate. So for instance, if you were doing a sauce, a curry sauce that had yogurt in it, it's really important to use a 0% fat yogurt when you're doing the dehydrating, and then you can add the fat back at the campsite. So we like to take ghee with us. It's heat stable. It doesn't go bad when you're on the trip, and it makes things taste really nice compared to just the dried food. So we use this in quite a lot of our recipes. It's a little thicker than olive oil, so it doesn't tend to seep out of the containers. It's just easier to travel with. Things like dried tomatoes you can do yourself with seasonings on them, but if you don't have a dehydrator yet, you could just use sun-dried tomatoes in the same recipe and it will work just fine. You might have to snip them down a little bit with scissors when you're packing your food so that they rehydrate quicker, but not everything has to be made from scratch. Speaking of things being made from scratch, preservatives are your friend when you are going without refrigeration, and even if you're someone who likes to make everything from scratch, it is good to have certain items that are just pre-made shelf stable, and then you know you can depend on them when you don't have refrigeration in the backcountry. So I think that covers pretty much the ingredients that we use in a lot of our recipes, how to approach fruits and vegetables, and how to combine meals together or separate them out, especially if you have people who only want to eat one component of the meal. And so once you start experimenting with the dehydrator, your menu will open up quite a bit. But until then, you can buy local products in your grocery store or order some things online, or look at the freeze-dried meals in your camping store and start from there. Good luck with planning your camp menu, and if you need some help, stop by Bushwhacker.